I knew this was going to be a popular working actor because we are today blessed with the presence of Canadian casting queens. That's exactly what I'm titling the both of you. Andrea Kenyon and Randi Wells. Thank you all for joining the Working Actor today. Thanks for everybody who's tuning in globally to the show. Hope you guys are all having a great week. And thanks for making the time to tune into this 1 hour conversation with Andrea Kenyon and Randi Wells, who join us on the Working Actor, because you know it's going to be a good one. So thanks, ladies, for making time for us today.
Oh, we're happy to be here, actually. We're excited.
I'm excited too. You know, I'm born and raised in Montreal. So when you are in the industry and you hear people who are, you know, working actors and trying to make it into that industry and going in for auditions, you always heard the name Andrea Casting. And you always heard the name of Andrea Kenyon and Randi Wells. And sometimes you'd hear stories from actors that they were very intimidated by the both of you, or others were very inspired by the both of you. But the consensus was is that they all wanted to meet you because they wanted to audition for the both of you. So when you hear stories like that, how does it make the both of you feel? Because you guys have been at this for a long time successfully.
I don't like to think that people are intimidated by us.
Yeah.
We're actually probably two of the most real people who don't. I mean, what casting is our job, and we love working with actors. So there's really no reason for intimidation whatsoever.
Yeah, well, that's it. Exactly how I reacted to that. It's
Yeah.
like we're here to support, and we, as Randi said, we have a job to do, but we're here I mean, we do our job better if we have a great dynamic with the actors and the creators and stuff like that. So it's in our interest to help and to support wherever we can. So please never, ever, ever be intimidated.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to meet the both of you about a month ago at an event, a film and television event. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm like, oh my goodness, is that Andrea and Randi? That's amazing. I want to speak with them because A, I want to get you guys on the Working Actor, and two, I just want to know what's going on in the industry. And walking away that night, I felt so like as if I've known you both for so long and as if we've been friends for so long. And I love the fact that you were both so down to earth and giving with so much insight and advice. So I'm happy you guys are here today because I'm hoping that you can give a little bit of insight into what's going on in the industry right now and what actors can get really excited about. So Andrea, let's start with you.
Okay, cool. In that regards
Yeah.
regarding what we, oh, okay, oh my God, really? What can you run that again?
Sure, sure. You know, because I feel like since COVID, it's been a little bit of a long time for the industry to kind of get back up and get back and, you know, get back into the audition process and production starting up again and, you know,
Right.
movies happening and all that. But I kind of feel like since 2024 happened, there's been this resurgence and this kind of positive energy moving forward that things are getting back to normal. Do we see that happening?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we've gone through a lot of hell, like, you know, the
COVID strikes.
yeah, well, that's it. After the COVID situation, we ended up with the long-term strike, and that was also devastating to a lot of the industry, the performers, the crews, the agents, and us, you know. Because the funny thing is, through COVID, we managed to continue. It was like the the industry is used to dealing with a certain amount of chaos, right? And to organize chaos. So we managed to keep quite busy during that period of time, generally. But now I think the strikes, following the strikes, you're right in that it is starting to come back now. I think this is when we all have to, like, pull down deep, you know, pull up the energy, as you said, and just really tackle things. You know, we're in a bit of a quieter period than we have been in previous years, and Randi and I are making a definitive choice to keep involved and keep active and look to what can we do differently, what can we do better, what can we, you know, prepare to help go forward, you know, what that'll make us better at what we do. And taking, you know, those situations where there is maybe a lemon, you turn it into the lemonade. So that's
Mm.
what we're doing actively, and I think that that translates to an actor as well, because, you know, you sometimes when you're not doing what you want to do in your life passion, you start to question yourself. And I think staying engaged is critical, and staying with a positive attitude of constantly growing and learning. I think that's what's critical to all of us. So we kind of all need to be fed by the same, let's say, nutrition. But you know what I'm saying? It's about really
Positivity.
positive,
Positivity.
staying
Yeah.
engaged, and not just sitting there going, yay, I want it to come, but actually being active and helping to make it come. And so looking in a little bit, looking inward, what can I do to make my product, which is yourself, generally better?
Yeah. You guys have been at this for over 40 years, which is impressive and remarkable. And I'm like, it's just to have that longevity and success in actually helping actors get the perfect role for over 40 years in Canada is pretty impressive. I congratulate and applaud the both of you. So, what was it that made you decide that you wanted to get into this industry and become a casting director? I know that you were both kind of like born into the industry, but what was the definitive time in your life where you said, I'm really good at this and I'm going to make a career out of it?
You know what, as I've kind of said in past situations, I've talked about my father and how I entered into the business, but I worked with my dad for many years, because it was something that I was always interested in. He was an acting teacher and a theater director, for those who don't know. And funny enough, it was at a point where my dad said to me, he's like, you have, because I had wanted to do some musical theater as well. And my dad said to me, he says, you can't do both. You have to pick. You can't, that would be a conflict of interest. You have to select which way you go. And I did an assessment of my capabilities, and I thought, okay, I really know how to communicate with actors. I have a creative streak. I'm very organizational, and I want something that I can do that's outside of my working with my dad. So call it a rebellious, not teenager, but I was a little older than that. But yeah, it was an assessment of my criteria, and like, or not my criteria, my skills and what I had available. And I just jumped in and I started to teach myself, and through the years, I just kept, doing more homework and learning and reading. Um, and then years later, Randy and I connected in terms of business. We'd been friends since we were 11. So
Oh,
it was many
We're
years
a
later.
lot older now.
Yes. But yeah, so it was really just an assessment, and this, hey, I think I can do this. And then trying to build the company. And it's been years and years and years of doing so. And
yeah.
every year, I think we get a little bit closer to what we want it to be ultimately. But I think there is no ultimate. I think we're going to always continue to change and learn and grow, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Randy, what was it that made you decide you wanted to be partners with Andrea, aside from the fact that you're working with your best friend, but what was it about the industry that, attracted you to it?
I've always loved movies and anything to do with the arts. It wasn't actually really a decision to get involved. It was kind of quite accidental. My background is fine arts. I went to university for fine arts. Uh, Thought that I would end up probably working in advertising when I left school. But ultimately, what ended up happening was,
Need to
huh?
draw for Disney, right? Weren't you even?
Yes, I had somebody approach me to actually work for Disney in their animation department. But at the time, I was young and stupid and was afraid to move to Orlando by myself. So I said, no, thank you.
You turned down the best place in the world,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so my background was it was music, it was fine arts and stuff. And then what ended up happening was I got married, and wasn't working out very well. And I was living in Michigan at the time, and I came back from a separation. I came back to Montreal, and Andrea said, well, while you're here, would you mind helping me with extras casting? And, I needed a job. I needed to keep earning money. So I said, yeah, and I did that and went back to my husband. And after a couple of weeks, it was finished.
And
So
like 30 years later now, so that
30 years later, yeah,
that
I
while
came
you're
back.
waiting,
Hmm?
I said that while you're waiting for things to
Yeah,
resolve.
while you're waiting. But yeah, it didn't work out. And then the rest is history. I came back and we just continued to work together. I was doing extras casting for a long time, and then we decided that wasn't what we needed to be doing anymore. It was tough work. Props to all those background casting people out there, because it's
Yeah, it's labor intensive, very labor.
very labor intensive.
Yeah.
And we decided to just do the main casting, and it's been like that ever since. I think for me, what made it really interesting was just what could you do with it, right? Like my background being the arts, when I was helping Andrea with extras casting, I made it my mission that the background was going to be as perfect and as varied and as what you would see if you were walking down any street. And it just became very important to me to do it that way. So it became really exciting and interesting.
What I find interesting about the whole casting job is that there is no school for it. You can't enroll in a program in university or in college and say, oh, I'm going to learn how to become a casting director and take courses. It's things that, like you said, either you have an idea, you're interested in it and you start learning and you get your foot in the door and you make it happen. So the both of you made it happen very successfully, and you're well known throughout Canada and abroad. So tell me a little bit about what your day-to-day is as a casting director today. And then we're going to get into the whole points about what it is that you look for whenever you seek out auditions and actors to audition for the role. So what is your day-to-day like today?
Wow. I mean, every day is different, and that's the interesting thing about our job is really every day is different. But because you could be starting from anywhere, but let's take a typical day of starting with a project. And I mean, the first thing we have to do is we read that script, and it becomes part of our our skin,
Bible.
our our tissues, to truly understand that script. So we're reading the script, we're creating character lists, we're creating breakdowns and descriptions of that is the critical document for us, is that breakdown. And we get support from writers on that sometimes as well. And then, I'll jump forward a little bit and going into the area of coming up with ideas, because Randy and I will spend a good amount of time coming up with our own ideas, as well as soliciting suggestions from the agents. I mean, that's a standard. Obviously, you're probably aware of that aspect of things. But the creative sorting through of the suggestions and coming up with our own ideas is really based on what we know of the actors or any homework that we do, because we consult all of our past auditions when somebody is submitted to us that we haven't seen maybe enough to know exactly what they can do. We'll look back at the old auditions. How did they sound? How did they move? What did they do with the material? Did they bring it to life? Was it a substantial scene for them to bring to life? Could they do more with more material, or this character? So we're kind of imagining what each actor will do with the material. And based on that scale of yes or no, or they did a great job or they didn't, or maybe they could with this, we kind of make our list. We determine how many people and what we can see, how many we can see for each role generally, although it's not always about math. That's another question and discussion. But it's not dictated by numbers. It's really about who we think can bring the character to life. And then the process will sometimes include the reviewing of all the materials, and assessing and keeping notes and rating people, based on what we think the creators would like, or the decision makers. So we'll include those that we think are perfect and awesome and oh my God, they're perfect. They're our vision. We'll include the ones sometimes that are also, they're good actors. They've made a good decision and a good choice. Not necessarily our perfect vision, but they should be included to be considered. And then we'll put some people that are they're not our vision, and we don't think that they're the vision of the clients, and But we keep them on the side because as the process continues, we might get feedback or insight that maybe those people are the right thing. So we'll move them over again. We'll bring them forward. And it has happened that the one person that we might have left on the side, we find out after a little bit of feedback from them, oh my God, that's exactly what they're looking for. And we bring them forward and it becomes a success story. So it's like mutable. It's changing all the time, you know, and that's exciting. And then we try to guide throughout the day. We're trying to guide the actors, or we're trying to guide the process, like our decisions or whatever, according to what we know that they need and they're looking for, and what will bring the most life to the characters or the show, you know.
So no audition is ever lost in front of your eyes.
Never,
Oh,
never, 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 never.
oh,
Yeah, it informs us, and if it doesn't inform us immediately, it'll inform us for later. And like Randy, you said, you know,
you can be looking at something for one show and it hits you, oh my God, they'd be fantastic for this other thing. They might also be fantastic for the one you just read them for, but whether they are or they aren't, you're always thinking about, other things that you have going on and other roles that are coming up.
I mean, the process, I'm sorry, you know, and I know we're limited on time, but the process is filled with so many other hundreds and hundreds of tasks. But those are kind of like some of the broad stroke
Yeah.
tasks today, you know.
It seems like it's a 24-hour job, it's a 7-day-a-week job, and you're constantly always thinking about who's right for the role anywhere you are, right? And I'm wondering when, because I know a lot of people are tuning in. I just saw someone saying that they're tuning in from San Diego and New York, not only here in Canada. So
Mhm.
we were started off the interview just saying how, some people are intimidated by casting directors, especially people who have a reputation of being the success level that the both of you have. So when you see actors sitting at the point before COVID, when they were sitting in your agency waiting to go into the audition, when they walk in, what do you expect from that actor when they walk in to come and audition for a role for you?
That they sit down, makes themselves comfortable. We try to keep them as relaxed as possible. That's really what we want. We want them to be able to come in, to feel comfortable in our space. We try to make our space as conducive to that as possible, and just let them prepare, let them take their time and get ready for, I mean, listen, I could never be on that side. I have a lot of respect because you're putting yourself out every day. You're putting your talent out there, and inevitably to be judged, right, by a bunch of people and in terms of what they're looking for. So yeah, come on in, relax, make yourself at home. You'll often see us kind of going back and forth in the office. So we'll
But
say hi to everybody.
but then once they get into the audition room, I think that's another level of the expectation. And
Mm.
at that point, I think what's most critical is that the actors have prepared. You know, it really is critical, the preparation. And I know that that has been an issue of contention in certain cases, too much material, not enough time to turn it around. But obviously, we're all aiming for the ideal, because the better time, the more time you guys have with the material, and that the material is not too dense or too long or too extended. But you have a lot of players that make a lot of those decisions, and it's a huge structure. So you're pressured between, you know, wardrobe requirements and production requirements, and the actor needing the time to prepare. So we're navigating that and balancing it. And then, of course, the material is determined sometimes by a casting director from another city, or perhaps it's determined by the director themselves or the writer themselves. So once that has been, let's say, regulated, and the actor has received all of these materials, I would say do your best with the
Mm.
amount of time you have and the amount of material you have to prepare as much as possible. And preparation means reading through the material, reading the breakdown, reading the sides, everybody's lines, not just your own, and looking for those things that can make that life come off the page and be more than just the lines. giving us a life before the scene, a life after the scene in your mind that you've worked on, to bring the depth, the richness to it. And nobody's looking for an invention beyond, that is so unique. But the more interesting, the more rich, the more depth you have looked at the character and the character's life and where they fit into the scene, the more interesting it will become to us. So it's your vision. It's your way of seeing things that maybe we don't see. I mean, I've heard other casting directors say, one actor walked into the room, and we've had the same experience. Like, you hear the lines over and over and over again, but then one actor will walk in and say the lines in such a way that it's like, oh, I didn't hear it that way before, and it's the gift of the actor. It's the talent of the actor that has this vision or this observation or interpretation of something that will, like, whoa, we hopefully have done a little bit of our own homework as well. But to see an actor come into the room and bring something, the observational skills is like, oh, wow. And, and the depth with which they experience things is awesome as well. Sometimes you find certain actors, they're very sensitive to any, just normal day-to-day interactions. And you sometimes find that the people that have those experiences so surface sometimes also are able to bring it forward in the audition room much quicker as well, because they live that way as well. It's interesting. There's
So much insightful knowledge in what you just said. At what point do you think the audition starts? Like, when the actor gets the breakdowns and the sides, at what point as a casting director do you expect them to be fully in audition mode? Is it from the time we get the script? Is it from the time we walk into the agency that we're fully that character because we're living it, we're breathing it? Or is it just the time where you call us into the room and say, you're next?
I think that's a choice, right? I mean,
yeah.
people, you hear stories all the time about how some actors will choose to remain in their character from the time they start filming until the end of the show. And I have to imagine that that brings something for them. I mean, obviously I'm talking about maybe some of the leading players that have a very particular character that don't want to break character. I think for us, I particularly remember one time, and Andrea, you might remember it as well, where we were auditioning for a scary scene where a character was driving down the street and all of a sudden a ghostly girl comes into,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
ghostly girl kind of steps in front of and the story is she's mute and everything. Well, this one girl came into our audition, and when she came in, she was like not signing, but she was writing stuff. She wasn't speaking. And I did not know whether she was truly mute.
Oh, wow.
And literally, it wasn't until she was just about to step out of the audition room where she said, "Okay, bye." And it was like, oh my God. It was,
You're hired. You
hired.
are hired.
Actually, she ended up getting the role.
Did she get the role?
She did get the role.
Okay.
Yeah, but it wasn't because of that. But
No.
she really manifested something so beautiful. I think, to answer your question quickly, the idea is that whatever works for the actor, but honestly, what we would expect is, as long as once they're doing the work, once the camera operator says action, that's when we care that they be invested in care, and
Right.
like, if it works for you to start getting into character beforehand. But I'm unfortunately the stupid one who they walk in a very grim mood, and I'm like, are you okay? Leave me alone. Don't break my character. I'm in character. I'm in the zone.
And they don't want to be rude to you because they're like, this is the woman who's making the decision, so I can't be rude to her. I got to talk to her.
Like, leave me alone. I'm in character.
Exactly. Sometimes I've always wondered, when there are multiple pages, it's not just one, when you're given maybe 5 or 6 pages to rehearse and memorize, Why do you pick that certain scene?
There's a very definitive reason in it, and it's different for each show, but it really is to try to show the character, or the to give the actor something interesting to play, to give the director something interesting to watch of the character. We'll give them generally contrasting scenes, or we try to give them contrasting scenes if it exists within the material. Like sides is preparation of sides is another like
Art
aspect
form,
of our
yeah.
job. Yeah, it is an art form. And it's really because we think we have to be careful. That I hate phone scenes, because you're on a telephone. It's like more like voice acting than it is interactive. I'd like to see actors deal with other people, other characters. That's, giving them something to do. And something that just, sometimes it's not about the exposition of the material. It's not, we don't want them to have to just tell the story. It's really tell the story of the character, if anything, or give them emotional challenges, perhaps, or character trait challenges, so that we can see, can they handle that? What do they bring to that? Or how do they handle something where there isn't an emotional challenge? Can they make that interesting? So there's all kinds of reasons, and it's exciting. Actually, picking the sides is fun too. It's like, oh, I have 25 scenes. How do I get it down to 10? 2 pages, like 8 pages, sorry. Two scenes, 8 pages. How do I pick?
Yeah. And I'm assuming that you guys have so many audition tapes to see and to view. I remember hearing you say that, you spent one night and you were watching 600 auditions, and I couldn't even, like, after 10, I would probably be like, I'm done. Um, so what stands out to you when you're watching the same scene over and over and over again? You said maybe sometimes people will say it differently, but when you're watching tapes, what is it that stands out to you?
How about you? Want to take
I
that
sure. It's funny because yes, I mean, especially right since COVID and since self tapes, where the majority of what we're seeing at this point is self tapes.
I don't
Um,
think we're seeing 600 auditions in a night. I think we're reviewing maybe 600 submissions, like audition
submission.
submission.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, oh,
I don't
that's
think we'd
yeah,
ever do
because I think we've
600
done like
auditions,
300. Oh,
maybe.
and an overnight. Yeah, but
Okay, we can agree it's a lot.
That's all right.
for me, what I generally do is I go through a bunch and I find somebody that really strikes, like for me, that was a fantastic audition. And
But what makes it a fantastic audition, Randy, is what I think she also wants to know.
well, I mean, I just think it's first of all, we each have our own interpretation of the scene and the performer playing it. I mean, obviously it's what's supposed to be these days, but I particularly just love watching a performer that is just so natural and so real that you just get so involved. It's
Mhm.
like you feel like you're the fly on a wall, in somebody else's conversation. And when I get that feeling and I genuinely feel the person is right for the role, the audition was beautiful, it was obviously very well prepared, it becomes kind of like a little bit of a marker for me.
Barometer.
Yeah, it's a barometer. Who comes in at that level, maybe a little under the level, maybe did somebody beat that level? And it just because when you're hearing the same material over and over again, obviously everybody has, again, an interpretation of it. Um, but it's also our job to bring to the creatives what we feel are the strongest reads, like the ones that we would immediately say we would cast for that particular role. And it becomes a little bit of a game, right? Because since it is so subjective,
Mhm.
and there are so many people weighing in and deciding on things, and there's so much involved. It's not, you can have a fantastic audition, but maybe one of the producers or one of the creatives just wasn't seeing a blonde-haired, blue-eyed person for that role. They just envisioned it as somebody in their life who's a brunette or whatever, and so you kind of got placed on the side because of that, and because there's so many people weighing in. We have to kind of narrow down what we feel, but for a first, let's say, go ahead. And then after that, there are still so many people that would be great for the role. And it depends on where they land, right? Like, did we cast that role in the first go around with the people that we personally felt were the strongest for the role? Or do we send in another batch?
Has there ever been an incident, and I'm sure there might have been, where you mentioned it before, where they're like, well, the producer, the director was envisioning a brunette for this role, and the person that you're really rooting for is blonde, for example. We can easily fix that with a wig, or
Yeah.
we can easily maybe persuade the director and producer to for the reasons why this person is suited for the role. Like, do you guys kind of then at that point
Yes,
influence them with
we
So
your
will
decision?
definitely.
our job is to try to manifest what the vision is of the production. And when I say production, I mean the combined vision of the director and producer and creators and writers and all that stuff. But so, I mean, so we will propose a range, but a range that's defined by what their vision is as well. And even though our interpretation is what our interpretation is. But in terms of, like ultimately, we are constantly negotiating or navigating the when we get the feedback that we can use to make, and we're asking and in requesting. I know actors are asking for feedback all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't get it from them, but they'll tell us who they, their short list, but they won't tell us who they, why they didn't like somebody else or why, and so we're always assessing that as well. We have, certainly when it comes to something like hair color, I think Randy was just using it as an example, but
Yeah,
certainly hair color. I mean, wigs, they don't even want, they don't like to work with, but hair color, obviously, an actor might even be willing to change their hair, and so we'll anticipate that, and we can maybe sometimes mention it, or we can. But there have been times where I can definitively tell you where a client has not included somebody on their callback list, and oh, they look a little too old, and if we're convinced otherwise, I mean, there have been stories of casting directors fighting for their actors, and it is the truth. It
mhm,
happens on many different levels all the time, because we do know the actors that much better than anybody else, right? We're with them all the time. We're interacting with them
and
all.
we've seen so much material from them.
Yeah, different situations. Oh, we know the actor's skills. I'd say below the actor themselves, we're the next ones in terms of who knows what they can do, you know? And so we definitely are, we have to, because anyway, in a situation where they haven't been included in a callback situation, we feel strongly, we'll throw them in. I've done that at
Yeah.
least 2 or 3 times. What's that?
Stick them in.
I'm sticking them in. I
Like,
don't get,
oops, you mean
no,
you didn't ask for that one?
yeah.
Well, watching.
Oh, no, no, I'll tell them why. But I
That's
mean,
amazing.
and it has ended up in the both instances where I can definitively remember doing it, it ended up with a positive. So, but it's part of our job. That is our job. Like we're hired because of our vision, that
Mhm.
that they believe that our vision and our treatment of the material or the treatment of our job is going to match what they need, right? The clients. And then, so we have to have a voice. We have to have a creative vision. If we don't, we're just, like we're just clerical workers, and that's not the job at all.
No, no,
It
not at all.
is a creative job, and you have to have a voice, and you have to, we had a situation, and I hope I haven't told this story too many times, but we had a situation where a production came in from out of town. It was a big show, big names, and they had never worked in Montreal before. So they didn't know if they had to they thought they had to bring in somebody to do a silent role against a leading player. That they thought they'd have to bring them in from LA. And Randy and I were on the call at the same time,
Oh, and
the
yep.
room from each other, looking at each other, going, "What?" are you kidding me? So
Yeah.
afterwards, we spoke with the producer, but then we were fortunate enough to have a live session. We brought the director in, and it was our first session. By the end of the first session, we had gained his confidence and his trust. And by the end of that show, they were actually trying to bring some of our Montreal actors to the UK to do scenes in the UK that had moved from Montreal to the UK. So it was like, it was a definite success. But if we don't do our part in boosting the talent and boosting the process, then, we're not doing anybody any good, including ourselves.
Yeah, I love that story. I'm looking at the time and I'm looking at the amount of people who are participating and want to get some questions in. So if you are just joining us, because I keep on seeing the participation attendance going up, we are with Canadian casting icons and queens, Andrea Kenyon and Randi Wells, over 40 years experience in casting, and they're celebrating 40 years, obviously, and rightfully so. They're not only here in Canada, they're also members of the Casting Society of America, Casting Directors of Canada, Casting Directors Association of Quebec, the Academy of Television Arts and Science, and so many other things. And they've won so many awards. So obviously, if you're tuning in at the right time, because they're going to give you some of their insight and advice on how to perfect yourself as an actor as well. So let's get to some of those questions. I'm going to go with Jonathan Apotiv. He says, sometimes self-tape instructions ask you for 1 or 2 takes. However, if the amount of takes aren't mentioned or specified, do you recommend doing more than one to show that you can play it in different ways?
I would say quickly, yes. I think so. I think at least 2 takes is a good idea. I think more than 2, maybe too much, and some casting directors won't respond to that. But I think 1 or 2, I think it's a better, unless they say just do 1 take. I think 2 is a great number. Giving a little bit of variety is a good thing. And, label them if you want. Like some people have labeled their takes with more, less, this, more of that,
Yeah.
stronger, lighter.
Also, if it's a smaller role, I would definitively say, yeah, definitely 2 or even 3. Like if it's
Yeah,
just
for a
if it's
small
an
snippet.
extra role, yeah.
Okay, we've got Wayne McNamara. I hope I'm pronouncing his name properly. McNamara. Apparently, you know him. I've returned to the business after 20 years. Great to see you both again. You have cast me before years ago, the Stork Derby.
Oh my,
Okay.
Derby.
Back in the biz again, and of course, self-tapes are the new norm. What are your expectations with self-tapes? Are the room sessions a thing of the past? Love to get your feedback on that, and thank you for making time for this.
I wish they weren't so much in the past. It feels like they are a little bit on the past, but we're hoping they come back because I keep renting my space. So I have high hopes. And I think, I mean, in terms of expectations, I think that could be an entire thing by itself, like an entire chat by itself. But I mean, ultimately, it shouldn't cost you too much if it, like a simple, you can make it on a cell phone. And I think there's some lovely apps. Even Casting Workbook has an app that helps to prepare that. And then, a lot of people question about lighting and all that other stuff. I would say, I particularly personally respond. I really like on location auditions. If you're in a car, I don't mind if you're in a car. If you're at a doorway, you can be at
Really?
a doorway in a
You do
kitchen.
not have to be on location
No, you
to
do
do
not have
your
to. You
auditions.
do not have to, but it's fun. We enjoy it. And so my point is, because sometimes the lighting will help, like exterior lighting helps sometimes, and it's really awesome. But I'm just trying to find ways to keep it reasonable and cheap for people. They don't need to invest in so much, although people have said that even if you do, it's tax deductible at the end of the year, which is awesome. But and then do the work as you would do it in a standard audition. Like eye lines are important. Make it to the right or left of the camera. Prepare yourself accordingly. And I don't care personally. I don't care if your reader is your mother, your child, a friend, another actor, or whatever. And I think that's what I'll
Just
cover
make sure
now.
you have a
Well, yeah, you do need a reader, or at least somebody on a phone or a cell phone or on a Zoom
or a recording, something.
recording, but somebody saying the other lines, because acting is not in a vacuum. I love to see people interacting with another character, so that's important. I'm
All
trying
right.
to do the speed answers so that we can get through a few questions here.
All right. We've got Laura who asks about action scenes over self-tape, and I'm assuming that could be really difficult, just like asking for a love scene over a self-tape.
Uh,
It's challenging, right? So are self-tapes okay? Or a self-tape with many lines from other characters off the top before your first lines of dialogue, let's say 5 or 6 lines. So how do you record an action scene over self-tape?
I would say make some broad choices in terms of the action. You're not going to be able to get into the little specifics. You have to look at the scene itself and make some decisions and try to simplify it for yourself, but imply that you understand. In small scenes like that where there is a lot of action, we do our best to try to convince production to allow us to do a live session. But in the event that you are not in that privileged situation at the time, like I said, make some like definitive small choices, and then you don't need to do every little beat. Just make a few choices and try to carry those out. But don't choose something that you know is going to be challenging to manifest, you know?
Hmm.
And be aware that we do need to see your facial expressions. So, I mean, that's pretty much what we're looking for, right?
So in other words, if you can maybe do one take of it in a long shot and or a mid whatever, you know what I mean? Medium frame, sorry, blah, blah, blah. And one maybe in a not as close up. If it's an action scene, wouldn't necessarily do a close up, but maybe a medium close up or something to that effect. But the in action scenes, you want a little bit of a wider shot, you know, but do another take, maybe a little tighter.
All right. Michael has a question. He's new to the industry, so he wants to know if you have any advice on newly represented actors to get noticed.
It's always doing the work. It's always doing the work.
Going back to doing the work. Yep.
It's doing the
And
work and turning in a really good audition.
yeah,
I mean, that's really what matters. It's
yeah.
not the tech. It's not a choice that nobody else has ever made. It's about bringing something to life and doing a good audition. There's so many other things you can do to get into the industry, and that's a longer conversation.
Yeah. We were talking about the auditions, and we were talking about what stands out to you and if you watch the entire auditions and whatever they're submitting. And Olympia wants to know what attracts you first. Is it the actual audition and the talent of the actor, or is it the way the actor looks?
I feel that we assess very quickly the look and the sound of the actor. That like we need a lead. If we need a leader, somebody who's leading a group of people or in a power position, they do need to have a strength of their voice, but that's part of the actor's prep, hopefully. Or it might be outside of the realm of their capability. I don't know. It depends on the timbre of the person's voice, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to make sure that actually sounds like it makes sense. We've just done a lot of military roles, and those they had to have that sound. They had to have that essence of military strength and authority. And the visuals have to be, there's a lot of range for some visuals and others there isn't. If we're looking for a model, because I think there was a TV series we did where we had to constantly cast models or that type. And so, yes, the assessment is, do they match that requirement visually? And audio is, is definitely considered quickly. And then we watch the audition. But the fact is, one can trump the other. It depends on the character. It depends on the situation. So we're going to make notes. We're going to note it, and then but if somebody is completely wrong, hopefully they're not even auditioning yet, like at all. Like the self tape shouldn't have been requested if they're that far off, unless their picture doesn't match what they are, showing us now. you know.
Now, Andrea and Randy, I don't want to bring a downer onto this, but there's that documentary that everyone is talking about, Quiet on the Set, about child actors and Nickelodeon and what happened on set, years ago. And
Hmm.
Lisa has a question about child actors, and she's like, "What are some key points you want to tell young actors and more so their parents so they have peace of mind?
Well, I mean, peace of mind is, it depends on what you're talking about, because ultimately I know that I have not seen that, but I know kind of the concept of what it was about. I think that people have to be very careful not to be seduced by the industry,
Mm,
um, to avoid, getting into a bad situation. You have to assess it, and with all of the intelligence and smarts and spidey senses that you have.
yeah.
And I think you can get that from who's involved. If there's a reputable casting director involved, that's number one. Number two, like you might meet the director, the producer, and even if you have accepted the part and there is a situation where it is not comfortable, there's something wrong, you have to be sensitized to your spidey senses. um Sorry for using that, but that's the easiest way of conveying what I'm trying to say. But
Yeah.
so I mean, I think that, again, it's just, and the child needs to be able to understand that they have a say, they have a voice. We've had a lot of kids in auditions that have come in and said, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want? What do you look? And it's like, no, whoa, 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 I want to hear what you have to say. I want to see what you propose. And I think it's an industry where people are trying to please someone else. And I think you can't lose your sense of yourself and the sense of having a voice, and to protect yourself. I mean, it's important. And the parents, again, have to be very, very aware if they're getting a vibe. And again, don't be seduced by the industry. Don't be seduced by a part or a show. If this isn't the right one, something else will come.
Oh,
If
I
it's
love that. And that doesn't only apply to children. That applies to any actor who's auditioning for a role. They can be put in that situation regardless of their age.
even us. I mean, Randy and I have interviewed for jobs, and we both got a weird vibe once from a show, and we did it. And
Because
we actually ended up not getting paid for the job. And yeah, they actually filmed, well, that's happened to us a couple of times, but this one particularly, we went into the meeting and we both went, why are we not, what's wrong? And we didn't trust ourselves. And you learn from your own experience, right? It's
Yeah.
like, nope, we got to trust ourselves.
Yeah, you got to listen to your gut.
Yeah.
As I was saying before, we do have a lot of people who are tuning in from the United States, a lot of actors, and a lot of the question is, are you open to casting actors from the US to work here in Canada for you?
we would love
Unfortunately,
to.
yeah, we would love to, but we're not, generally we're hired to hire Canadians, because they usually either have a casting director in the United States, or their budget is restricted in terms of how many people they can bring from outside of Canada. And they have incentives to hire as much, either locally in Quebec or within Canada. They have incentives like tax credits. So for us to start dropping in American actors
We
would,
generally have, right, the American casting directors
Right.
attached to
yeah,
whatever show we're working on. So we
yeah.
always advise them to.
And they generally kind of divvy up the roles in terms of what they feel like we can provide to them, and what they might be able to bring in with perhaps an established name, talent that they are familiar with and working in the United States sometimes. So
Yeah.
Although I
generally,
have to say, it's lovely to get some of the emails from the actors in the US and sometimes even in Europe, just saying, we love your work, like we love your body of work, and we would love to work on a film, that you're casting or whatever. And it's flattering to hear. But unfortunately, yeah, we are hired to basically find the Canadians that will fit the roles that's shooting.
Well, as a Canadian, I say thank you for that. Thank you for being hired to find work for Canadians. No offense to the Americans tuning in and everywhere else, but thank you. I think all the Canadians are like, yeah.
Well, they have their American casting director.
get out
Yeah.
the lab.
But you are tuning in and you are hearing from the best here in Canada. So this is not an hour that's been lost on you. No. we're going to get to one more question. I think I'll put it together, but how important is it for an actor to A, have a demo reel for you ready to see, and B, for them to be active on social media?
Demo reel is just really a supportive document for us. It's like if we're watching tapes at 3 in the morning and we want to know what else the actor can do and how much more than what we might have given them to do, is in their repertoire. It's nice for us to be able to search that out and find it and look it over. And it's also supportive to a read sometimes, and sometimes it can be in place of a read for certain characters, not all, but certain characters, it can be very helpful, and it should always be your best material. I'm not looking, nobody should just put together a demo that's just everything they've ever done, or that sort of thing. It should really always represent the best of what you do. And so that is just, it's a helpful supportive element, but I definitely recommend having one if you can. And then social media presence has not really factored into our lives. Although I know that I have heard occasionally on a smaller show, that, hey, if it's between two really competing capable actors, they might choose the one with a bigger social media, because it's a bit of a box office draw. It's like having a name talent in, somebody who's a name talent, considered name talent in feature films or television series. So you've already got a built-in audience, right?
Right.
But again, that only comes down, I find, and I've only heard it once in my 40-year career. I've only heard it once that they were talking about social media presence, and the idea that
Well, that's fairly new, right?
really
40-year career. For the first like 25 of it, there really wasn't a
was no
social.
social media. There wasn't even a fax machine when I but anyway, we won't talk about that.
And all the 20-year-olds right now are saying, what the fax?
What?
What? What are you talking about?
Did you say something bad?
This has been incredible. I just want to run down some of the incredible films and series that you have worked on and you've been responsible for. It's Durham, Barney's Version, Lee Daniels, United States versus Billie Holiday, which was one of my favorite movies. I think that was 2 years ago. Transplant, Midway, White House Down, and so many more. Can you give us a little bit of some inside scoop of what we can look forward to, maybe what's coming to Montreal or to Canada that you know of, and how we can get excited about those auditions to come?
Ghosts. Watch Ghosts.
Hey.
Thursday nights at 8 o'clock. Actually, season 3 just finished. We'll be starting season 4, going into pre-production next month. So it's a fun show. It's everybody that watches it talks about how there's nothing like it on TV, and we're really proud of it.
And then unfortunately after that, a lot of our shows that are coming up are kind of like, you can't talk about them. So, but we are hearing rumblings. We've just finished a feature that we can't talk about. We received the document. You cannot talk about this. But we just, but then we know that there are other films coming up and that we've heard about, and one particularly that is going to be with, hopefully, that everything aligns with a director that we have worked with often. I'll give you that little hint.
Perfect.
So we're keeping our fingers crossed. And Tasha, before you wrap everything, I do want to do the 24-hour marathon version of this show. So whenever you're ready, just let me know.
I'm ready. I'm so ready.
I could talk for hours.
I'm telling you, she's ready to talk. I can sit here and just look pretty.
We could do a master class. Like, instead of the working actor, we could do a master class with Andrea and Randy every week if you want. This would be great.
We should do like the Jerry Lewis telethon, but we should do it like as a talkathon. A
talkathon. Or we can do a reality show with the both of you when you're on set and you're working. I could follow you. We can do lives. We can make it happen.
We always thought we might do that when we ready to retire, because after you know what we do during the day, I don't know if we're going to have a job.
Well, we don't want you to retire because you're so good at what you do, so you're not allowed to.
Okay, we can't afford to anyways.
Well, this has been an incredible hour. I look forward to many more hours to come with the both of you. Thanks so much for making the time for us on The Working Actor. We really appreciate the both of you. And I'm sure everyone who tuned in today appreciated all of your insight. Thanks to everybody who tuned in from all over the world. That was amazing. All right, isn't that awesome? We need to have you guys more often on the show.
Anytime, anytime, really. We're ready.
Really appreciate it. And I will be on set with my phone doing lives with Andrea and Randy on Instagram. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you on the next Working Actor. Bye, ladies. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.